Hello, welcome to David Divine Broadcasting Sunday edition. How you doing? Hope you're doing fine. Hope you're doing good. Today I have with me Paige. Katie, easy for me to say, is the author of Letters of Love and Light. It covers 4 decades of UFO encounters. Katie is also Colorado's MUFON State Director, and she's a star investigator for MUFON. Katie, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here on this Sunday. It's rainy up here in the good old Rocky Mountains. I'm up in Colorado, up outside of Colorado Springs, so we're getting some rain showers.
Are you getting rain? Is that a wanted thing or a pain? I know it depends. All over the country, people are complaining about it being too hot or wet or.
Right. With the forest fires, I always welcome moisture. I'd rather have the rain than have it dry and have all these forest fires. We actually had a close call of fire by the fossil beds, pretty close to our home where we had to evacuate. So I always welcome the rain, but this has been more rainy than usual. So it's like, really? Rain now?
Right.
It's going to be turning to snow soon enough. We usually get our first snow in the middle of October up here. So it's coming.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, that's been the whole summer here. It's been either 90 or raining, one of the two. And so it's been kind of weird, but I don't know. It goes in cycles, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? But we'll take what we can get.
All over the United States, so you have to wonder about that.
Yeah, there really are, from hurricanes to earthquakes to I think last week with the storms, we had in Ohio, we had 7 tornadoes touch down and 1 earthquake. Yeah, and 1 earthquake. So,
well, hopefully,
yeah, tons of rain. But so, yeah, it's a real pleasure and honor for you to be here. Let me just say hi to a few people in chat. Hello, Cashapp. What's going on, Mitch? Bigfoot and more. Hello. Welcome, everybody. All right. Well, we were having a great conversation about writing and things we'll get to later, and Katie's new book and everything. But to start off with, let's ask Katie, how did you just kind of sum up, before we even get to that question, kind of sum up what it is you do at not only your website, but broadcasting on the radio show and investigating. There's so much to uncover here. Can you kind of give us a synopsis?
Really, just in a nutshell,
right?
Like so
if it's possible,
yeah. In a nutshell, like so many people, we all have our kind of unique experiences that we have in our lifetime. And for me, it kind of started out in the paranormal realm of things. Really got into ghost hunting and that kind of thing because of all the paranormal things I have encountered throughout my life. Learned about MUFON via just some documentary on TV where they mentioned the organization. I came in 2012 as a field investigator, basically to investigate what to me at the time I didn't know was ever known to anybody else or investigated, which was experiences I had on this high strangeness ranch out here in Colorado. We were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened. So I never knew anybody knew anything about it. My sister, my family, we'll get into that later. So I came in just as an investigator to start looking at these things that have basically plagued me my whole life. But yeah, and then the second Saturday of every month, Colorado MUFON, we just had this last Saturday or yesterday had Margie Kay out from Missouri talking about her winged aliens and, Mothman and different things. And when it comes to the cryptid side of things, I'm not the expert. So I really learned a lot from Margie Kay, and she did another little short presentation after that on Fast Walker. So every month we try to bring in speakers. So that's really awesome. So, running that Colorado group, we have a pretty active state for MUFON, and we have 26 field investigators. So, they're constantly getting cases. So I do that. And then on Tuesday nights from 8 to 10 Eastern on KGRADB, I host along with my 2 co-hosts, Shane Hurd and Tara Diulis. We host a show every week on ufology, and that's a fun show on kgradb.com called MUFON What's Up. So we bring in different guests all the time on that show.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not busy at all. You don't keep busy at all. No, that's awesome. Now, when you mentioned the well, first of all, let's start out here for anybody that doesn't know the acronym. MUFON stands for
The Mutual UFO Network. They've been
Right.
around since 1969. It's kind of their, we took over where Project Blue Book left off, kind of thing. So yeah, and that's just a small part of what I do. A lot of what I do is kind of outside of MUFON with independent, research and investigations. And honestly, like you, I think podcasting and that is so important. And it took me a while to finally somebody convinced me, like, you need to do this podcast. And I kind of hemmed and hawed about it because it's, that's not what I do, but I love it because that's how you get more information. It's part of the investigative process to talk with other people. And same when you go out on this, and you're doing the speaker gigs, you're going out as a speaker, it never fails that people will come up after and they'll have new information that helps in your research. So I think it's important that we all communicate with each other,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing if you come into things with an open mind. Sometimes it's not even topical, but you learn things or something from somebody if you have an open mind. It's
Mhm.
amazing uh, what you can do if you just listen to people. Like
Yeah.
you didn't have well, you have knowledge, but maybe the speaker had so much more information, and so you learned because you listened, huh?
Right. Yes. Yes. It's important to
Yeah.
listen. For sure.
So now, so with the ranch, Clearview Ranch, right? Also named.
Well, that's what it was known at the time as Clearview Ranch. They didn't want the name or the location of the town known. And like I
Oh,
said, I didn't know it was ever investigated. So what happened in 2013, I bought a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker, written by George Knapp and Colm Kelleher. And
right.
just reading that book thinking, and at the time, Skinwalker Ranch, it didn't have a TV show. It wasn't really all that well known. I just thought, well, here's a ranch that had strange things happen. Let me buy it. So I bought it, started reading the book, and came across the chapter Other Hot Spots. And in that chapter, Other Hot Spots, they talk about a ranch in Colorado. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, just sitting on the floor in my living room and, oh my God, calling my sister on the phone, calling my mom on the phone, going, this has to be the ranch from our childhood, because there was a strange family dynamic. My mom worked for United Airlines and she was dating a gentleman that owned the ranch. So I did not live on the ranch property full time. My mom was dating that person. He had 3 sons, and the 2 younger sons lived with us during the week to attend a larger school district because this is a small town. Its true location is in Elbert County, Colorado, which is east of Colorado Springs in the Air Force Academy. There's several different bases and, of course, NORAD out there in Colorado Springs. And that was the first time I ever learned anybody knew anything about the ranch at all. So it's in Elbert County, Colorado. And that's also where I learned of the 3 PhD investigators that investigated the ranch. I also came to find out later there were other investigators there as well. But we had Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD out of Laramie, Wyoming, who was really well known for past life regression and hypnosis. He was a pioneer in the field, and that's where Letters of Love and Light came out, the book. Because what I
Right.
did was, I wrote him he was old school letter, wrote him a letter, is this the ranch? And told him all the names of the people that live there. And he's like, sent me a letter back. Yes, it is. A week later, because it's only a 2.5-hour drive from me, from where I lived at the time to Laramie, I was pulling all the documents. And actually, anybody, if you're ever in Laramie, Wyoming, you can go to the Heritage Center. It looks like a big teepee building. It's right there by the University of Wyoming. And that's where Dr. Leo Sprinkles has over 70 boxes of decades worth of his research. And
Wow.
it's fascinating to go through. So you're pulling files from like Linda Moulton Howe and all these big names in the field. And what's really cool and why the book came to be is Dr. Leo Sprinkle kept all his response letters. So we have letters from Phil Klass, who is a well-known UFO debunker, and letters back and forth. And I just got lost in these letters. And it came to me in a dream one day that, hey, if I find these letters interesting, other people will as well. So I spent 3.5 years going back and forth to the archives, taking pictures of all these letters. I'd come home, read the letters, pull all the all the interesting information out, like if they had ET descriptions or craft descriptions, or people talked about, was this a dream or a memory? Because people they would write these letters saying, it was the most vivid, realistic dream I've ever had. Like no other dream I've ever had before. And that was such a common theme that it warranted a whole chapter of the book just on dreams or memories, on implants, on letters from children, which were adorable, letters from little kids and their experiences. So it was really a labor of love to Dr. Sprinkle. And I was super thankful that I finished the book, had it published before Dr. Sprinkle passed away. So, he was so honored by that, which made me feel really good because, there's so many pioneers that came before us that put so much work and time. And when I interviewed Dr. Sprinkle about them, like, you spent your whole life, researching the phenomenon, and here you are towards the end of your life now. Do you have any regrets or anything? And he's like, no. He's like, I never did. It was about the people you meet along the way. And he just told me, Katie, just enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey and what you learned. So he was just a dear, dear, dear man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I need to finish the book, Letters in Love and Light, but I did read a good portion of it, and the portion that I read was the interview section of Dr. Leo Sprinkle, and that when you were interviewing him, and it was fascinating. You just touched on something that he said, "Enjoy the ride," but
Yeah.
there in that first part, I thought, what a great job of you to do to get to interview him, to reach out to him. And it really is that easy. Like you said, in some cases with authors or people that have came before you, they really do obviously want to talk about this stuff. So that was really
Yeah.
cool. What were some other good points in that portion of the book that stand out to you?
Well, for me, one of the cool letters I came across, it was, we were, most of us anyway, are very familiar with the Travis Walton abduction in Snowflake, Arizona from 1975. And in
Uh-huh.
this letter, there was, or in his files, there was a letter from a pastor who had an experience in Snowflake, Arizona, very similar to Travis Walton's, but years and years and years before his abduction. And I thought, wow. So that was a
Yeah.
cool case to come across. And then, Francis Warren Air Force Base there in Cheyenne, Wyoming, multiple witnesses, military base. And I think the Francis Warren cases should have been bigger than what they are. So there's not a lot out there about it. And to come across a lot of documents about those encounters and sightings and witnesses, that was cool. So I added that into the book. And like I said, the letters from children were really interesting as well. So, I mean, to honor his work like that. And I'll tell you, one thing this book did is it puts everything in perspective. It really does. Like, and it's made me kind of brave as a researcher or investigator, because at the end of the day, 40 years goes like this,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
what you think
Yeah.
might be a big opportunity, like just doing the History Channel's Beyond Skinwalker. I mean, before I did this project with Dr. Sprinkle, I might have been too terrified to put myself out there like that. But in doing this book, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to risk it and just do it, because time is short. And if you don't share your stories and share your experiences now with each other, pretty soon we won't be able to do that anymore. So it really kind of made me brave, to just look at his whole life's work and go, okay, I can follow in his footsteps. And in fact, I really do feel Dr. Sprinkle around me a lot of the times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Had you, yeah, I believe it. I believe that. Had you known him before you worked on that project, or you just approached him specifically for that reason?
Approached him. I wrote him that letter and said, hey, this is is this the family's property? This is location. And he wrote me back, yep. And then there were two other PhDs as well. There was John Durr, PhD, and Peter Van Arsdale. And John Durr was a seismologist. They also had Clarissa Bernhardt out there on the ranch property. I found all this really shocking to me, because here I thought this was a big family secret nobody knew anything about. And to come to find out all these people were there. And then once I pulled the documents on the ranch, I mean, this whole bottom drawer here at my desk is filled with my 10 years of research on the ranch.
Wow.
To find out they had Clarissa Bernhardt. She was a psychic medium, and she was one of the only psychics at the time to predict an earthquake by location and time, almost to the minute. And she was out there on the property. So I tracked her down in Canada and did an interview with her. But so when John Schuessler found out about my connection, John Schuessler is one of the founding fathers of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and he's here in Colorado. So he learned of my connection to the ranch, and he's like, oh, okay, well, I have the original briefing document from the APRO investigation. And so he bestowed that original document. And in this, there were so many validations of my memories and my sister's memories and my mom's memories, that I was just blown away. Because here, I'm 9 to 12 years old during the height of all this activity. So, when you're a young kid like that, you kind of question your own memories, right? I mean,
Right.
so I'm
Well,
like, oh
yeah.
my gosh, did that happen? And then to see it actually reported at the time from back in the day, I was blown away. Like the circles on the ground, there were cryptids, all sorts of different things, these weird, strange boxes. Linda Moulton Howe, she got her start out there. At the time, these mutilations, cattle mutilations and horse and sheep, and even found articles about dog. But they were at the height. I mean, these were almost occurring daily. And so, yeah.
And so that's how, and that the stuff at that ranch is how your first initial sites. Where it all started for you. That's how you got into the subject in the first place.
Oh, for
As
sure.
a as a 9 year old, you said.
Well, no, well, not at 9 years old. I mean, I started getting into the UFO and the research on the ranch in 2012, because like a lot of us do right out of high school, I was married and raised my family and went to college and worked and all those things. So it wasn't until later, as my kids are growing up, that I started questioning all that, and then one thing led to another, and the paranormal things, the ghosts and all that kind of stuff. I compartmentalized all that. I never connected it to the ranch until that second book came out, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, also by Colm Kelleher, and they started talking about this hitchhiker phenomenon for people who visit these high strangeness locations of blue orbs, which I've experienced of blue orbs, and shadow figures by my bed, and paranormal kind of activity, which I separated from the ranch. I just thought this was a separate thing that was happening at our home, which was an hour away from the ranch.
Oh,
But
I got you. Okay.
now I connect it to the ranch, especially since when I went back to film Beyond Skinwalker, which took a week to film. So you're out there filming for a week with History Channel, and then they take that down to, I believe it's 44 minutes for an episode. And of course, the first
Right.
few minutes
Yeah.
of an episode, in the last part of the episodes, they're having to review and kind of set up the area. And then they review with Travis Taylor and the Skinwalker folks. So you're really left with maybe 25 minutes of what they filmed for that week. So there was so much out there, or so much that happened out there, that didn't make the episode. But that was the first time I had been back since I was a little girl,
I got
when
you.
they filmed
Okay.
that. Yeah. And that was super intense for me and super personal,
Right. So all that old stuff was coming back up.
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. But you found validation in these writings and other people's experiences. So that's kind of neat, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people hold their sights, their experiences in, right, because it's not massively accepted right off the bat, or maybe people you surround yourself might make fun of you, or you
Sure.
feel inferior about it. But so it's good to find some validation. That's neat.
Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people, like, I mean, even more so back in the day, like, it's kind of since the hearings and, 2014, this is kind of coming out. People are starting to talk about it. It's more widely accepted. But, back in the day, you were crazy if you talked about things like this. So it's getting easier and easier to talk about these experiences that people are having. And I love the crossover now that people have, and they're, coming on different shows in different paranormal, whether it's cryptids or what. So that's all, I think, really important, to push all these phenomena together and to get a better understanding of the phenomena as well. Because I do think they're all intertwined and interconnected.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's what we were talking about backstage. It's been on late night radio and other places, conferences. It's been here for years and years and years and years. Just like you said, Leo Sprinkle started way back then, or the founders of MUFON. But why was it so slow for people to talk about? Now, like you say, it's kind of, there's plenty of YouTube shows and AM radio shows. But what made it so slow to get here?
I just think it's, technology, honestly. I mean, they didn't have the luxury of being on all these podcasts and communicating in this kind of way, and social media and, Twitter and that. I stay away from Twitter a lot, just because I hear it can
Yeah,
be kind of nasty and vicious. So
yeah,
I'm
that's
like,
good.
I don't like
That's
it.
good.
I kind of tune that out and I just kind of do my work. But, back in the day, they didn't have the luxury to do that. So you would have to go to these small little conferences. And Dr. Sprinkle did start up some really cool Midwest conferences in Wyoming. And so, yeah, it was these smaller groups of people coming together. And of course, he had Coast to Coast and some of these
Yeah,
radio shows, which were awesome, but it's not now. There's thousands and thousands
right,
of shows and
right.
that. So it's just, it blew it wide open. Yeah.
So we're heading in the right direction now. We're heading in the right direction. Where
Partially,
where
yes.
people have partially. What's the partially? Oh, do explain that. Explain
Well,
partially. I,
partially,
I like that.
well, now we have,
I like that.
yeah, as an investigator, I mean, now we have, everybody has a cell phone, everybody has Photoshop, CGI. You don't know what's real anymore. You don't, I just
R-
love, like, the 70s is still my favorite decade to research. People investigated differently back then. You had the old film. And so there's some downsides to where we're headed as far as that goes. There's so many more hoaxers and people trying to make a
right,
buck and this and that and the other thing. So it's not all good, but
right.
for the most
So
part, it is.
so back then it was you need a picture or video
Yeah.
for
You,
proof, and now it's like you have a picture and video, that's not proof, right? So it's came full
exactly
circle
right. They're going to just,
because
yeah. I mean, look at
yeah,
what
you could
happened to the whistleblowers that just came out. I mean, they're just trying to discredit him left and right, and it's like, really, come on. And they're doing that on purpose so other whistleblowers won't come forward because they're not going to want to go through what David Grush is going through. So it
right.
just puts the kibosh right back on it again. It's like, oh, it's so frustrating to me. It really is. It's like, let
Yeah,
people just speak their truth and go, thank you. And
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Because the government's having meetings about it now.
yeah.
Uh, and why all of a sudden that is, I don't know. And I feel kind of gross about the fact that they're doing that. But like you say, they try to discredit people, or in some cases, put stories out there just to lead people in other directions too, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, that's been going on for decades too. And I do believe in my research. So through my research, the 10 years researching the ranch, since this was news to me. So when I pulled the files from Dr. Sprinkles, it says Warren, and then his last name was redacted out, from Camp Carson, visits the ranch property. And first of all, my first thought is, why is a soldier from Camp Carson on the ranch property? That's question number one. Felt something take over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him. He would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 different times, which made me think of like MK Ultra, mind control, maybe Black Access projects that they were doing out there. We know NORAD was very much aware of the property. We know we had people from, like I said, Camp Carson out there, from the Air Force Academy out there. I asked Richard Doty one time at a conference if he was aware of the property. He very much was. So my question was always, how much of what was occurring out there was Black Access military projects, even the
right,
mutilations for that matter, and how much of it was unexplained, unknown paranormal phenomenon, ETs, aliens, and that. So that's sort of been my quest this whole time, like chicken or the egg. And if it was unexplained, paranormal things that can't be explained, how long has that been going on? And is that why the military then came in? Were they trying to figure out who was, you know, committing these mutilations? And at the time, satanic cults was a big theory of the day. That I think could be safely ruled out. I've had the honor to meet all 3 now, both Linda Moulton Howe, Chuck Zukowski, and Christopher O'Brien, all whom were really on top of this back in the day, and pioneers in the field of mutilations. And talking with them just recently, this is still an ongoing phenomenon that's occurring across the Midwest, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado. And in fact, when we went to film for Beyond Skinwalker, one of the first scenes we shot was in this old haunted, I found out, bar in one of these small towns out there in Elbert County. And of course, this is where the local ranchers just go hang out and have drinks and stuff. And of course, they're curious, what are you guys doing? What are you filming? And so, of course, I tell them, and every single person in that bar had a story, and photographs of cryptids or still Sasquatch in the area, which is really interesting. This was one of the original drawings in Dr. Sprinkle's folders of
Oh, wow.
what my mother called white fuzzies, and I think she did that because I was a pretty young girl at the time and she didn't want to scare me. But they were like gray-haired Sasquatches, and they were menacing. They would kind of observe you from the barns and stay in the woodline. What you have to understand about Elbert County, Colorado, is it's very like flat land. For most areas is very flat and like cattle ranches, and then you had these outcroppings of ponderosa pine. So you did have wooded areas, but they were very scattered throughout. And these Sasquatch were seen out there. And what's really cool, I had Bob Solis talk about Malmstrom up in Montana. So what was happening, the mutilations were so frequent that the different police departments were communicating with one another, and they would have these maps on their wall. So when I went to Florida to interview the undersheriff, Bill Wall's widow and his younger son, they were telling me about this map. And so they would have a mutilation up in like Montana and a mutilation in Colorado, and they would happen almost at the exact same time. Then there was the unmarked black helicopter phenomenon that was occurring at the same time. So again, was that our own military men and women conducting these mutilations? And if so, why? But they were menacing people, these helicopters. I pulled up dozens of articles from the time, and I'm like, why would helicopters be chasing? I mean, here's some samples of the articles, just dozens and dozens and dozens of articles.
Wow.
From Elbert County from back in the day. But I'm like, why? I asked Richard Doty, why would these helicopters be like frightening people? And he said it was a diversion, like a distraction. I'm like, from what? What are they doing?
Right. What are they distracting? Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
right.
what is the threat of people knowing?
Well, here's what I think. Here's what I think. If you're wondering what
All
I
right.
think,
I
I
do
always
want to know what
found
you
it.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found it fascinating that the Navy kind of, and although it maybe wasn't necessarily their intention to come out like they did, but nonetheless, Navy kind of has been a little more out front than the other branches of the military. Air Force has remained quite quiet about it, and in fact they tend to come out and then go back, whatever. And my theory on that is, if the United States Air Force has a heavy hand in these black access projects that affected probably thousands of people, unwilling, I hate to call them victims, but people that were affected by these black access projects, that would mean liability. They don't want the truth to come out. Not only do they not want the truth to come out about black access projects and what was going on out there in places like Elbert County and other high areas of high strangeness, but we're we're talking about, they don't want people to know that we have unknown flying UAPs, or I like to still use the old word UFOs, flying around our
UFO.
airspace,
We
flying
can
around
still
our
say
airspace.
that.
They don't know what they are. They don't want people to know that,
Right. Okay, so
So
we can still say UFO, huh?
yes,
Yeah.
UFO.
Cashew has a question here. She says, well, what kinds of phenomenon have been experienced together? Oh, wait. She's got two questions. First one is high strangeness accompanies what kind of phenomenon?
Okay, many. So the first thing that was reported out there when they bought the ranch were these humming noises. I mean, and sometimes they'd get so loud you couldn't hear yourself speak over them. So of course we're like, is there cisterns? Is there like what's going underground? And you'd hear these loud bangs and sounds under the ground. So that always brings me to tunneling, where they was that part of the phenomenon? I don't know. I've so many times gotten on Google Maps. I'm looking at like the Dulce Base in New Mexico, Four Corners area. Of course, we had Snippy the Horse in 1967 in Alamosa, where they tunneling through Colorado Springs, through Elbert County to the new DIA. At the time, it was Stapleton. So there's humming sounds. There were these strange large circles on the ground where nothing grew. And in fact, this was in the document. There were two of these. My sister and I remember one because we were flipping the Frisbee outside and we had this wet, heavy snow, but there was this large circle where it was just dry dirt, and we were so baffled by it because we're like, it's snowy everywhere else. And in this document, it talks about the 75-foot diameter circle where nothing grew, and in the snow were drops of blood when the investigators were out there. I'm like, what's with the drops of blood? Then we had the cryptids. There were large, like phoenix-like birds spotted out there. There were the Sasquatch beings spotted out there. And then also in the document, there were these drawings of these strange ET beings. This was in Dr. Sprinkle's folder right here. And I didn't share these with anybody for a long time because they're very unusual looking, different than what I've ever seen before. I call them the Tubi guys. But they have this like shield over their bodies, these long, almost insect spidery looking arms and legs, these tubes that came out. But what was really fascinating at the time, I was the guest speaker coordinator for Colorado MUFON. I had invited a guest that wrote a book called Flashbacks by the name of Sean Bartok. And there I am sitting in the third row just watching his presentation when I come to find out later that his ranch property that his book's about was 14 miles away from the ranch in Elbert County of my childhood. Up pops drawings of the beings that they encountered. I got to get these. Hold on. Hopefully I have it here.
And these are all from Leo Sprinkle's folder?
Well, the one from my ranch was, but this one, so this guy here, or no, this guy right here, this is Sean Bartok's from his book, Flashbacks. And these tubes right here in his neck, they said came
look at
out.
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this was his other drawing right here of the tubes that came out of the neck right here. Everything's backwards on the screen. So here's his, right? These tubes that came out. And here's the guy from Elbert County with the tubes. But they both have the same shape eyes, the same wrinkly foreheads, the same brow, the same wrinkles around the mouth, these strange tubes. They're very AI looking. And then the other ET beings that were reported to being on that ranch property were the Nordics, the tall, blonde, blue-eyed Nordics. And what was reported in these briefing documents that I acquired all these years later was that they were in conflict with one another, and we were just like in their way. Like, don't mind us. We're here doing our thing, and we won't bother you. And then there were these strange boxes that were seen, and disappearing boxes, and the mutilations, of course. And then also in the briefing document, there were two A-7Ds that crashed they were scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base in pursuit of a UFO, is what Dr. Sprinkle's note said. So I send a FOIA request to the Air Force, and I get this big, thick, all these papers back. See how thick this is about the crash. And it's very mysterious. It was supposedly an instructor and a student pilot scrambled out of Buckley. And one of the causes of the incident, there were 255 live rounds of ammunition on board. And one of the causes of the craft is that the instructor misidentified the beacon light of another aircraft, which they never identify as the students, but it wasn't, and hit the students. And all the instrumentation in the plane was out, which is something that's reported when you're in close contact with the UFO. And they hit, both pilots ejected, both pilots survived. I would love to be able to find these pilots. I haven't been able to locate them yet. But what's interesting, I went to David Marler's archives there outside of New Mexico, outside of Albuquerque. And I'm just going through, I love pulling cases and accounts from that decade to kind of correlate, right? And lo and behold, I find from the same year that the NORAD in Canada scrambled 2 interceptor jets in pursuit of a UFO and admitted it and made the front page of the National Enquirer. So we know that the Air Forces have done this before. So why wouldn't they do it here in this case? So I truly believe they were chasing an unknown UFO during the height of the mutilations and crashed. And there you have it.
So you said the reason that they might not want people knowing is out of liability, possibly. Yeah. But you sent, now who sent you this? They sent you that gigantic stack.
Right.
Who sent that to you?
Well, wow. I sent a FOIA request to the Kirkland mishaps office.
Okay. And they sent you that many papers back.
Yeah. Wow. But what's interesting when you're looking at the radio the transcriptions of the radio tower and stuff, especially where it gets really juicy here. So you have let me just give you an example. You know, you're reading along, and then you'll have these big blacked out sections of what,
That's amazing.
especially when you're getting to what the other pilots are seeing in the air. Let me find that page. It's hard to miss because it's completely blacked out. But yeah, so I'm like, okay, so they're telling me, but they're not telling me. Look at this one.
Wow. Okay.
There's
Wow.
our information.
Right. Right.
And then I'm sitting there in Parker, Colorado, getting an emissions test on my son's car, my youngest son's car, and my cell phone rings, and it's United States Air Force. And I look at Tyler and I said, oh, I better get this call, right? And so the guy, he's the head of FOIA. And so he talked to me for 20 minutes on the phone, basically, you know, what are you doing? What do you want? Why do you want it? Da, da, da. And
Oh,
he told me, he said, instead of sending FOIA requests for anything in that area, I want you to call me directly.
wow.
So they're watching. They know. They're only going to give you what they want you to know, you know, kind of
Wow.
thing. So I'm like, okay, they're covering up something. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, because yeah, I'm shocked. I've never made an inquiry with any agency or anything where they sent me literally a novel back to explain what I didn't see, basically. Or is
Right.
that's kind of what I get from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically that's true. Yeah. I mean, they do, you know, they give the location there's still some pieces that they did not get back or whatever. I mean, it's very thorough. It's very interesting. What I would love is I need to have somebody from the Air Force actually sit down and read it for me and see if they think it's out of the ordinary for like for me personally. And this is just, I don't know anything about the Air Force, but I'm just saying, as somebody outside looking in, to put 255 live rounds of ammunition on a student's aircraft,
Right. Right.
A-70, and they're flying them over residential neighborhoods. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that. You know, like, is that
No,
normal procedure? I don't know. I don't know if that's normal or not.
we're just gonna have a attack above yeah, with a
Yeah.
student, with a student, no less. Think about what they would do if it was an enemy, let alone if they're doing that to students.
Yeah, it's a suspicious report, and it really makes me wonder, you know, what was going on out there at the time, and the fact that it's still occurring to this day. You know, I was stunned to go out there and had the kind of responses that we did out there filming with History Channel. You know, the family that purchased the property that lives there now has lived there since my mom's boyfriend's family moved out, so over 30 years. And
Wow.
when they were out there filming, they got that. If you watch episode 3 of Beyond Skinwalker, it's all on the Rocky Mountain Ranch. They got the hum. They picked up that hum sound, which was interesting because all the years they had lived there, they had not heard it. And then we're back there filming, and there it is. We set up all the equipment. NASA had made this little box to try to communicate with inside the part of the original house. So that was one of the first things when we pulled up to the property. And this is the first time I had been back on the property since I was a little girl. So it was dusk. It was just starting to get dark. And I was like worried that, you know, it would be dark and I couldn't see, you know, the house or anything because I'm trying to remember everything from my childhood. And I knew the house was in the right place, but it looked different to me. So I'm quite like, no. But I come to find out that the original ranch house is inside this addition. They built to the left, they built to the right, and they built to the front. So it looked very much different, but the original house is still in that structure. So they put the equipment in the part of the original house. And what was interesting too, we were doing, you know, Geiger counter readings and different EMF readings, and all the locations on the ranch property that were original had very high readings, and the places that were all newly did not. So I thought that was interesting. But when they had that ham radio operator try to communicate, nothing was happening. And then the producer of the show says, hey, you know, this is Katie's story. This is her childhood stuff. Let's let her talk to whoever. And so, you know, the ham radio guy, he held the radio, and I like, hey, remember me? I'm back. And all the equipment just started. And I repeated that 4 different times, 3 times with the radio, 1 time without it. But what was fascinating and what didn't make the episode is during that time, we were on a private channel. So there was no radio interference or anything like that. We were getting reports from the Vietnam War, and we're back. We're back. Just little like almost like EVPs were coming through. And then now talking later to the producer, they're listening through, I don't have access because they have it all on the film or whatever, but they were
Right.
getting responses like EVP responses, almost like codes or Morse codes or things inside the house when I was talking. So the house was responding to my
Wow.
presence being there. And I honestly, where I thought I was going to be really frightened and afraid, because a lot of those things that happened back in the day were scary for me, black shadow figures, all these things. But now as an adult and having researched it, I really felt empowered. Like I got kind of in kind of like this fighting mode where I was like, okay, I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm grown up, and whatever's here, I'm not going to let you hurt me or do anything to me anymore. So I kind of got into that kind of mode, which surprised me even, actually,
So you felt some strength.
I felt strength.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many questions I have from your last paragraphs. But one, being a ham operator myself, I'm interested in that when you spoke into the ham radio, you think that they talk back in Morse code, telling tales of Vietnam. Did you say
No,
maybe
it was, you
possibly?
could hear it. I could hear. So as a ham radio operator, I am not. I wasn't able to hold the radio. So he had to
Right,
hold it. We
right,
just talked
right.
into it. You can see it on the episode, because they had to
Yeah,
call and get permission and all that stuff. So he's holding the radio and in through the speaker. So they had this whole table set up. It was kind of like an L-shaped table. So we had all
yeah.
this equipment and all these monitors. You could see it on the show, and it audibly you can hear reports of the Vietnam War coming through. And I was
Wow,
really surprised that didn't make the episode, because I'm like, oh my gosh. And very clearly you hear we're back or they're back or something like that. I wish I had access to that footage, but I don't. But the biggest thing that happened when we were
wow.
filming out there that did not make the episode, and I hope it makes next season, is we had David Morehouse out there, who is a remote viewer. And they did the biggest remote view in the history of the country, with over 70 remote viewers from around the world remote viewed the ranch. And there's a few podcasts out there that have David Morehouse talking about what they found out there. But I kid you not. So he set up this table in their garage, and it was Andy, Paul, the two main characters on the show, myself, and David Morehouse. And he was going over everything these remote viewers found on the ranch property. So they were viewing the ranch itself from a particular date and time, which I picked, by the way, because it was the boys' mother's birthday and the night of the most scary in 1976 event that happened on the ranch. And what happened was, it was the boys' mom's birthday. The adults are in the front room playing board games. Me, my sister, and the three boys are hanging out in the boys' bedroom when that hum started up. And anytime that hum noise started up, you knew something was going to happen. So here's the hum going on. We're all like free, like, uh-oh, here it comes. Something's going to happen. All the power in the house goes out. Okay. So we're in the dark, and the brightest light, and I say it was brighter than the sun, it was the brightest
Wow.
in out of the boys' windows, come shining down on the house, and we're all freaking out. Okay. And it's at that point we get this disembodied electronic voice. And it sounds crazy, I know. And this is part of why I'm like, could the military have been trying to scare us off the property? Because the military maybe can do something like that. But it basically said, and it's in this briefing document, it says, we have attention. We have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Don't cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. That happened. And so my
Wow.
mom, my sister, everybody's freaked out. We're scared. That's why we were told never to talk about what was happening out there, because that happened. But now, as I'm talking to more people, even I just did a podcast from the UK, and there's an investigator out there who's really much into cryptids. He experienced a disembodied electronic sounding voice. And then when you tie in these AI looking creatures to this electronic sounding voice, it makes me wonder if it wasn't some sort of extraterrestrial and not the military, because that ranch sat vacant for over 10 years. If the military wanted to acquire it, they could have just bought the property, and it didn't. It sat vacant for all those years where nobody lived
Right.
there. So, but to see that that was one of the big confirmations that was in this briefing document. I called my sister right away. And in fact, my sister came, I don't know, a few years later. I started, you get to a point where you research so much, you start sharing what you're finding. So I put together a presentation. My sister came to watch it, and I did the voice in the voice that I remembered from my childhood, and my sister
Right.
literally had like a PTSD reaction to it. She started
Wow.
tearing
Yeah.
up. Yeah. So,
Wow.
it's just been confirmation and validation to some very scary events.
Yeah, that's there's so many interesting points there. One of them being that ham radio stuff that they spoke through the ham radio,
Yeah.
but the other thing that's wild is something that you got to tell that story in the book, or a book anyway, is that
Yeah.
you heard that same sort of sound or voicing in just the open air, which, frequencies are everywhere.
Right.
Who knows what they were using as a speaker, but it's quite possible that that's what was happening. That's amazing. That
Right.
is
Right.
just amazing.
And everybody in the whole room, everybody was just like freaking out, like calling these guys from outside. They have to see this, because it was repeatable. It's not like a one-off. We repeated it, and
Right.
I repeated it. And that's where I kind of got into this little like fighting mode. It was like whatever was there on the ranch knew I was back.
Right.
Another thing that
Wow.
wasn't shown on the episode
Wow.
was I got this big, so the second night of filming, there was a big blizzard, snow, so we're out there with headlamps, snow's coming down, and going over the barbed wire fence. They wanted me to walk them back to the tree line where I had experienced this disappearing box in the daytime. So I was taking them back there, and two things happened. We get there, the readings are super high in the middle of trees where there shouldn't be anything at all. But number two, as I'm walking in the snow, there's just like white blankets of snow with no footprints. All of a sudden, there's footprints, and they're large, they're bipedal, they're not deer, they're not elk, they're not fox, they're not rabbit, they're not dog. They look like human prints. They walk maybe 10 to 12 feet, and then the prints disappear again, and then they come back again and then disappear again, as if like
Wow.
something came up interdimensionally, walked, and disappeared. And I was so thankful that the film crew caught all that, and it's in the episode. So I'm like, thank goodness they caught that, because that's legit there. Nobody was out there. I mean, that happened. And then the readings were really high out there. Just so many unusual things still occurring. And then to talk to the people in the bar to see that they're still having this happen. It just blew my mind. It's like, wow. And yeah, so now I'm conducting more and more interviews of people going through things to this day.
So
Yeah.
in the bar there, that people are talking about this, like, yeah, we saw that yesterday, or it happens around here all the time.
Yeah, they're literally going, hey, so check this out on my there was one
Yeah.
photo, and I gotta go back and interview this guy.
Yeah.
Him and
Yeah.
his brother were out. They have several hundred acres out there, in Elbert County, and they're elk hunting out there, shooting elk. And this is a daytime photograph, and you see the elk laying on the ground, and then you see what looks like Sasquatch in the photo. And my first
Wow.
thought was like, why aren't you like super rich? Like, this is one of the best pictures I've ever seen. And he's like,
Right.
oh, we don't want to like, these are private people, right? And so many
They
of
don't
these
want.
ranchers, they
Yeah.
don't want the notoriety, they don't want the attention, they don't want to be labeled crazy. They don't report it. Even the mutilations that are still occurring, they don't report them. And I wish they would, because we really need to get a handle on how often this is happening, still. So I wish they would report them, but they don't.
Do you think they've been nudged into not talking, or they honestly
Oh,
they
I know
just don't
that
want
for
the
sure.
attention?
Yeah. Yeah, I know that for sure. And I know that from the sheriff, Bill Waugh, his son. They were really ordered. And actually, in Dr. Sprinkle's files, it says Colonel so-and-so from head of NORAD says specifically to shut up and forget about UFOs and Bigfoot. Basically, they were told, and Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved as well, but the sheriffs were basically told to downplay the mutilations, because people were getting really frightened. This was occurring almost daily for years. So, you had loaded guns by your door. You didn't go up to somebody's house at night. You had matter of fact, one of the articles right here, you
But
had this $10,000 reward, which back in the 70s, that's a lot of money,
yeah,
to
yeah,
catch these.
definitely.
So you had people actively looking and pursuing. They put a no-fly zone over the county when this was
Wow,
occurring. So
look at
much
that.
information. Yeah. Yeah.
But they weren't offering up their own explanations for what they suspected was doing that. They were just telling people
Yeah.
to be quiet about it.
Well,
Yeah,
they
that's
they thought, satanic cults,
oh,
because you have to remember, this isn't just Elbert County and specific to this one ranch. This was occurring all across the county, Oklahoma, Texas, Wyoming, Montana, Utah. So this was the whole Midwest. Now, Elbert County got hit the hardest by far, but this was happening all across, and so they're trying to figure out, just like up in northern Colorado, what was it, 3 years ago now, I guess, because everything's skewed because of COVID. But I think it was
right.
pre-COVID.
Yeah.
We had all those
y-
mysterious drones out in northern
Yeah.
Colorado. That's never been solved either. We still don't know what that was. So the same kind of scenario where, yes, this was occurring. We never got to the bottom of it, and it's still occurring to this day. So
W- hey, that's an interesting question. During that period of time, COVID, that period of time, were you getting more or less reports, things reported to you
actually,
during that time?
less, I want to say less reports. It's amping up now. We're getting more reports now than we ever had before. And I think it's maybe just because of the publicity of, the hearings and more podcasts, more people are talking about it. Reports are up. And of course, it always ebbs and flows with the time of year. So of course, spring and summer, when people are out camping, fishing,
Right.
barbecuing, people are outside, you're going to get more reports, just because of that alone. It slows down in the winter, but all in all, COVID, it did slow down a bit during COVID times.
That's an interesting point. All the people that we've had on, they share that same sentiment. Everyone that yeah,
It's
spring and
interesting.
summer. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm starting to notice common themes of people that don't know each other, and that's definitely one big one that I noticed a couple weeks ago. Yeah, and I had never thought about that, right? Yeah, because
Mhm.
yeah, the people just aren't around. Well, it's no wonder that you're all over the place, right? So, that Beyond Skinwalker, that's on the History Channel. I wanted to touch base with that in case people watching wanted to check that out. That was the first season.
Yeah, his first season, it comes right on after this Skinwalker Ranch series. It's called Beyond Skinwalker. And I,
Okay.
I I have to tell you, this was sort of, I mean, I've done UFO Witness and a few other shows here and there, but these guys were incredible to work with. I mean, they were so careful. I couldn't even meet anybody ahead of time, not even David Morehouse. They wanted everything legit and upfront and on camera. So when I met with the original ranch owners, they like kept us apart until we were ready and on film. So everything was just raw and real.
And
And I love that. They
spontaneous.
never scripted anything. Nothing was scripted. And that surprised me because as somebody new, like History Channel is kind of like the big time, right? I'm like, oh, I'm so
Yeah.
nervous.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it basically, it's almost like reality TV where you just almost forget the cameras are even there, and you just get caught up in, they're shooting rockets off and we're doing EMF readings. We're out in snow blizzards and we're just doing our thing and, sharing with the family. The family that lived there did not know the history of their land, all of it. They knew some little tidbits of it. So I come and we're out in their garage area, and they had all the cameras rolling and we're meeting for the first time. And I'm like, oh, by the way, boom, all this stuff happened here, and I
W-
felt weird about it because I didn't want to scare them. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
really
They're
interesting to hear what they've experienced compared to what I experienced, and that whole thing. And that was all just raw,
yeah,
it was really cool.
were they caught on film putting the house up for sale while you
Yeah,
right
no.
as you were
No, they were
no.
actually very, very
The,
interested and very
yeah.
open, and, unfortunately, the mother, passed away just recently, so my heart
Oh,
goes out to them for
yeah.
that. I think she was ill, so that's heartbreaking to hear. But no, very open, very real, just down to earth, wonderful people. And the daughter, Nicole, that lives there, she's experienced similar things. The paralysis, that's another thing I experienced, was paralysis, these shadow beings, just feel that sense of being watched all the time, especially from the wood line. She experienced that too growing up there on the property. So to have that commonality, I think it's healthy. Like, oh, here's somebody else that went through the same thing. And in researching the land itself, it was known as the old Mulligan Ranch. And so I started looking at the provenance of the land itself, when it was homesteaded and who lived there
Oh,
and that.
yeah.
And so I came across, and you can look it up, Dick Mulligan on the internet. And Dick Mulligan was born and raised on this ranch property. And he later, in later years, he was a caretaker for one of the ski lifts at Winter Park Ski Resort up here in Colorado. And one of the ski runs, it's a black ski run. It's called Mulligan's Mile. So there's a little blurb about Dick Mulligan and Mulligan's Mile at Winter Park Ski Resort. And it said, oh, Dick Mulligan had the reputation for bold exaggeration and the gift of gab. And I'm thinking to myself, here's a man who was born and raised on this ranch property, and he was known for bold exaggeration and like big storytelling.
Right.
He wasn't exaggerating. He was trying to share
That's
the truth.
that's interesting. That's
Yeah,
very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I thought, wow.
And yeah, he may have had a good, gift of conversation, but here the guy was experiences these things, and that's how they write it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
Dick.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason. Yeah, that's part of the reason some people don't talk, right? Because you're going to get shut down. But
Right.
That's very interesting. I'm glad that you looked into that. So that's beyond Skinwalker, and you said there's going to be a season 2.
Didn't hear it
Right?
here.
I make things up here all the
He's
time.
making stuff up. I think so.
I
yeah.
am. I do it all the time. Don't worry, you won't get in
Me too.
trouble.
And-
They can
and
go
I
back
also
and look at.
I was going to
Yeah,
say,
they
I
can
also
go.
think wink, wink that they're going back. So
Yeah, they can go back and look at my other shows. I make things up all the time. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, it's no wonder you're on. You have credits here from Ancient Aliens, Beyond Belief with George Norrie, Coast to Coast with George Knapp, of course, Spaced Out Radio. That's where I saw you recently. Coast to Coast, Dark Becomes Light. But I want to thank you so much. I do want to let people know again your website. It's pinned below. It's katiepage.net, where you have your books available, Letters of Love and Light. And I will just mention real quick that you're writing a new book before we get out of here and
yeah, and
go
I
on
was
with our
mentioning
day.
just briefly before the show, we were talking about how us writers write and how you get in the flow. And I love that you
Yeah.
write in cursive and all that. And so we were talking about that. But I started this book a while ago, and then went through some big life changes, so it was kind of put on hold, and I was kind of beating myself up about it, like I really need to get back. But as it turned out, then Beyond Skinwalker came around and all these new experiences, so I feel like it was divine intervention that it was kind of held off. So now I'm like 4 chapters in. I hope to have it out and done within the next 6 months. That's my goal. 6 months. I'm a pretty slow writer, but there's so much to unpack, and there's so much research, and it's how to organize it so it makes sense and it flows, and it's factual. So, I mean, I have my personal story to share, but I also have all the research that I've uncovered. So it's kind of a hard book to do for that reason, because I have to absorb and process and kind of tie those worlds together. But yeah, I'm hoping it'll be done in 6 months. That's a goal I have. So as things slow down, hopefully here this winter, I'll write more.
That's awesome. Yeah, we were talking about that. We were talking about, is the new technology faster or more? Is writing in cursive more creative? Or we both shared that Scrivener was a program that you could buy and write in, but I felt it was distracting. And I guess it depends how comfortable you are with typing, which I'm not. So I tend to just spew out more stuff when it's in cursive.
Yeah.
And
I was teasing him that, like, anybody, well, I wouldn't say anybody, but there's a lot of people now that really can't read.
Yeah.
So it's like writing in Da Vinci Code.
Yeah. So it's my code. Yeah. It's my code. I can write it. Yeah. I can't get in trouble because
yeah, I talk to Word now instead of Scrivener.
Right.
I'll just talk, and of course you have to go back and fix some errors or whatever. But I tend to talk to myself a lot, just basically around the house. So it works for me to just audibly talk it out.
And when you were telling me that, I was thinking, you know what? That's a way better idea than cursive. Just talking. Yeah, that's. Why didn't I think of that? But maybe that's why you're here, to help me out. I don't know.
Awesome.
But anyway, and also one more thing. On Tuesday, catch Katie on her radio show. We'll go back. I have so many notes I was telling her before the show. Normally I have like 10 pages. I got 30 pages here for Katie because she's so busy. But the website is KGRADB. She's on there Tuesday nights with her guest host.
Yep.
So check that out.
8 to 10 Eastern. Yeah, check that out. I just love learning from other people. I was just telling David we just had Philip on there, and Philip Mantle and Dr. Irena Scott. So on the Pascagoula case of Mississippi of 1973.
Oh, yeah, you were saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So really cool, really awesome guests. I love learning from others. So I appreciate you having me on here. It's been fun.
Thank you. Mike Jones says, please come back. Hello, Jody. I don't know if I said hi, and hi, Elena. We're gonna sign off, but I really do feel honored and I appreciate you being here. And best of luck, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Bye.
Mike Jones says, Katie, we love your work and appreciate you. Thanks for the show. You're welcome, Christopher. Thanks for being here. Calm down. We'll see you Thursday. Right? Yeah.